Dennis Hastert, he's the former House Republican, former House Republican during the Clinton years, and he was also the Speaker of the House during the Bush years. He is now, if you look up under hypocrisy in the dictionary, I think you can see his name. This is a man,
under Hippo.
Under Hippo, yeah. This is a man.
I think it's okay to make weight jokes for Dennis Hastert. I think it's okay.
When you cross the pedophile line.
Right, we've crossed that line.
Is he like really, really enormous?
He's a pretty big fan. He's a big fan.
He hides it well under the jacket.
Yeah.
This is a man who kept files during his years in office, justifying an extensive anti-gay agenda by equating all of those, LGBT and Q now, maybe 2 Qs, agendas with pedophilia. And recently he's been indicted by the FBI for allegedly offering hush money to a former student that he allegedly molested when he was a child.
He had a Weekly Standard piece called Pedophile Chic. That was the name of the Weekly Standard. Weekly Standard's a fake publication, containing warnings about revisionist suggestions about pedophilia made by liberal organizations, right? Because liberal organizations were always trying to protect pedophiles.
Oh, yeah.
The piece concluded by saying that media groups were trying to, quote, set a seat at the table for pedophilia groups like NAMBLA.
Yeah, so his legislative file was labeled Homosexuals.
Binders full of homosexuals.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And so this guy who then did a bill, he says, that sends a strong message to the most heinous of criminals. This is a different now. This is probably from his homosexual file. Bill that sends a strong message to the most heinous of criminals who prey upon our children. You will be punished to the fullest extent of the law.
Very angry.
That's what Dennis Hastert had to say for people who prey upon children, like perhaps a wrestling coach and a teacher in a school that molests a young boy. Oh, right. That's Dennis Hastert.
And of course, sadly, as is often the case with these kinds of stories, the statute of limitations has long passed. So this guy is going to fully get away with it.
Well, he may face, she's going to face charges, already does face charges. Has he been charged yet? Yeah.
But not for the pedophilia.
For banking laws, right?
Exactly.
For violating banking laws.
So what's funny is that when that news broke initially, today's news is that he had binders full of homosexuals, right? Literally had files called homosexuals, as we explained here, and had passed bills against gay people, which we knew, but the degree to which he had targeted them, people had not remembered until this news story came out. But when the first story broke that he had paid off a kid in his school that he had apparently molested, Fox News came to his defense. Brett Hume and Geraldo. Geraldo said that he was the victim because he assumed that the kid that Hastert had molested was blackmailing him, right? Now, the reality is, for example, he could have been saying, well, you know, I'm going to do a lawsuit, whatever it is, which would not, it's not blackmail, that's not extortion, that's perfectly legal.
It's what you're supposed to do.
Right. And if someone had molested you when you were a kid, if your wrestling coach had done God knows what to you when you were a kid, what would you do? You might consider a lawsuit.
And that coach was ultimately a very powerful politician who you were afraid to come forward, you know, and you have been paying for therapy for years. And
who then actively goes around saying, you know, pedophiles should, you know, be served with the fullest extent of the law, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, and then Brett Hume comes in and says, again, also assumes blackmail, extortion, and says, you know, he wondered if the kid, who is now grown, of course, if the guy who was molested by Hastert was going to be charged.
What? Okay. The definition of blackmail and extortion is Hastert giving the kid hush money. Saying, like, molesting the kid and then giving him hush money and telling him not to come out. That's the definition.
And these are the guys who warn us about alternative lifestyles, who warn us about gay people, who warn us that if the gays will turn into pedophiles. The reason they might be warning us is because a guy like Hastert knows that he's a pedophile. And so he thinks, well, if I'm a pedophile and I have gay thoughts, then I assume that everybody else who's gay is also a pedophile. But that's not true. It turns out you're the pedophile, and you projecting that upon other people is not the right way to go. And of course, he's also covering up here. Like, oh, the gays, I'll get the gays. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I will punish the pedophiles the most.
And this is a common psychological tactic. I mean, I do believe that it's becoming more of the rule than the exception, that when you see people with incredibly passionate, angry, and defensive positions against groups of people, oftentimes there's an underlying reason for that. Oftentimes, if you dig far enough back, you're going to find some sort of emotional or interpersonal tendency that people are trying to suppress. And we've seen it in the psychological literature for years.
It's tough because we don't, it's hard because this is how the story of Hastert broke, to think of him as gay. I don't even, it's not, obviously, here's what it's not, is unfair to categorize, it's unfair to gay people to categorize.
Oh, completely.
Them. We don't know what the only sexual behavior we know, apparently, from Denny Hastert is a hideous one and a criminal one. It has nothing to do with being gay, it has to do only with being a pedophile.
But that being said, it's this kind of anti-myself mentality that we see over and over.
Since you're talking nerdy, and you're bringing science into it, which I resent. I just think that I've said this to Cenk 1,000 times, so I won't dwell on it, but I just think we rely on that too much, that we're too, there's no question that it is true a little. It doesn't explain racism. Those people don't feel black.
They're afraid.
Right, they're afraid.
There's
but I think the fear is the connection here. They're afraid. They're afraid black people are coming together. They're afraid gay people are coming together. They're afraid that their powerful, comfortable way of life, the way of life their parents told them, that the things they need to fear are, it's too upsetting that it turns out the things that they were taught to fear aren't to be feared at all.